I just wanted to give you a sort of heads up on the next few weeks worth of stuff. So next week's weekly assignment is going to be a sack animation, flower sack animation. It's like a weird touchstone assignment that everyone seems to have to do. But you're going to get a pre-provided rig, and you're going to basically animate that doing something. So the rig works, I've tested it. If you have issues with it, let me know. But consider this as sort of a proof of concept to see if you like rigging and see if you like working with rigged characters. You also kind of want to compare the, keep in mind animating this week when you're just doing non-rigged stuff, and then what you can do differently with the sack, how the animating is different with that. I will be going over rigging a little bit next week, sort of like how to. It's not so much going to be like a required lecture, but I'll, link you guys some rigging videos and such that I have. Sort of go over like the basics of what you might need for rigging your finals, if you want to. Because it seems like a lot of people do end up wanting to rig stuff. They might choose objects, like I've had someone do a sock monkey and you can't really animate that with deformers super well, so they just like rigged it. So that is totally a viable option. The other thing that you might want to keep in mind, I would encourage you to evaluate what makes sense for you personally. Stay in scope, obviously, if you can. But weird thing to keep in mind, if you're going into Anim 2 next quarter, one of the biggest feedbacks that I always get for that is, wow, we wish there was a rigging class before Animation 2. There isn't one, so what I'm going to do is sort of treat the last part of this class as, not like hardcore rigging instruction, because not everyone's going to use that, but I will be doing like a few different bits on rigging. So I would encourage you to sort of maybe play around with rigging a little bit for this. You can create a fairly simple rig without too much issue most times. And it might sort of help familiarize you with rigging, just like enough to sort of wet your feet and get comfortable when you go into Anim 2 if you're taking Animation 2. So that's just another thing to consider. Again, do whatever makes sense for you. I don't want to like push anyone into rigging because it's certainly not a requirement of this class. It will just give you a little bit of it'll make animating certain motions easier, and it'll make give you a little bit of like sort of flexibility that you don't always have with deformers. For grins, this is my sort of weird sack attack that I did. It's literally the same rig. I made like one tweak to it so that it doesn't like explode if you scale it. But this is the basic premise. You just have this weird little animated sack dude. And again, like this motion would be pretty much impossible with deformers. I'm sure you could do it. It'd be an absolute nightmare though. So that was a terrible motion there. But this is the basic premise of that. I'll do a whole video on the assignment next week, but that's just kind of give you an idea of sort of what rigging can do early, I guess. After that, so not next week, but the week after, you have the animatic due, and that is basically going to be throwing your sort of really rough animation into your scene. So this, originally I had this due week 5, and you could do this or the sack, and then I changed it because I'm like, the sack I think is a good assignment, I'm just gonna make it mandatory, go for it, whatever. So this is basically just, again, put your audio clip into Maya, get your scene in there as reference, and just start animating. This is gonna look a little bit different depending on whether or not you have a rig. Personally, if you have a rig, I would say just sort of, I usually like making my rigs as finished as possible and then animating them. So I would say do your rig and then do a little bit of animating. If you don't have a rig, you don't need to worry about that, so you can, I would expect maybe a little bit more animated content there, I guess. But the week after the sack attack, or like 2 weeks from now, is when the sort of like official production on your final starts. You also might consider doing a little bit of modeling for your final next week when you're doing the sack animation. I know that assignment took me like 3 hours to do. I know it's definitely going to take some people longer than that, but it might be good to sort of like start blocking in environment stuff, or like start working on your character models so that you can, be in a good place to start the animatic. That's pretty much that. After that, we're just going to go into sort of production mode for the final. So just kind of like, it's broken down into a lot of little like work in progress assignments where you just sort of like work on, whatever makes sense for you, if that's rigging, if that's modeling, texturing, whatever. And just sort of submit what you have each week just to sort of check in, get feedback on what you're doing, etc. There's no set schedule for what you have to do when finishing the final. And I'll get more into that, I guess, later, but if you ever have questions about, if you want more structure, I can impose person-by-person structure onto you. But I find that doesn't necessarily help a lot of people, so I'm kind of like leaving it open. That is pretty much the random bit on all of the next few weeks of stuff in a very vague and general way. So hopefully you have a better idea of sort of what's going on with that stuff.